We will start with explanation on outstanding universal value. And I think this is a very important... Is Iucn leaving the... You are swapping, okay. We start with outstanding universal value. Now, you all know that the term outstanding universal value was mentioned in the Convention 12 times. But was it defined in the Convention? No. The term is not defined in the World Heritage Convention, meaning that there is no specific definition in the World Heritage Convention, but the text of the Convention recognized that the definitions of heritage were potentially, had a potential to change over time, and also that how we review heritage may change over time. So I think the founding fathers and mothers of this convention had a real vision that there needs to be room for a definition which is very, very broad, and that's what you find in the convention itself. It was only in 2005 that paragraph 49 was added to the operational guidelines, which is actually very, very recent. And this paragraph 49 tries to give a definition of what outstanding universal value means. And you have this on the screen, and it means that it's a significance which is so exceptional that it transcends national boundaries and be of importance for all of humanity. So that's the essence of outstanding universal value. Now, next slide. You have, of course, specific paragraphs which relate to the criteria. So the committee considers that a site has OUV, as we call it, if a property, if a site meets one or more of those criteria which are defined under paragraph 77, 78. And that means that it's of highest importance for all of the international community, which has to protect this heritage. Now, next slide. This one you have seen many, many times. It must be the most famous slide used in all World Heritage classes and at the World Heritage Committee orientation sessions. According to the convention, it's actually the committee that defines the criteria for which we consider outstanding universal value, and it says that a site needs to meet at least one of the 10 criteria, but also it needs to meet the conditions of integrity and authenticity for those properties which are nominated under the first 6 criteria out of the 10, which means the cultural, and integrity for the, which needs to meet authenticity for the first 6 and integrity for all of the 10. This relates to that integrity was until relatively recently only used for the natural heritage, but then with an evolution in the thinking of cultural heritage, especially with the introduction of cultural landscapes, it was extended to all cultural sites as well. And then the third part, protection and management. Now, next slide. If you have seen this before, if something is not right, meaning that one pillar collapses, that the outstanding universal value tumbles down, if we can use that expression. It's very, very clear when the committee inscribes a site, it needs to fulfill all these 3 parts. And it needs to have a system of protection and management before we can actually inscribe such a site. So that's a task of the committee to ensure that a site has OUV, meaning having all these 3 pillars. And we had a situation at the last committee where there were lots of doubts. The ambassador of Switzerland made reference to that by many state parties intervening after the decisions the committee has taken. So I would make a plea to all the committee members to make sure that a site has true outstanding universal value identified by the committee at the time of the inscription and not the year after. So now when we begin this discussion on what is outstanding universal value, we have to consider, next slide please, that it is the Convention for the Protection of the World Culture and Natural Heritage. So the task of the committee is not creating a list of sites. The task of the committee is to identify those sites which are of outstanding universal value and which have to be protected over time, because it's a convention about the protection. It's actually one of the key conservation conventions we have on this earth. So I think that is very, very important, that the understanding of OUV is linked to this protection, and this is very, very clear in the article of the convention, which speaks about the identification, protection, conservation, presentation, including interpretation of the sites and the transmission to future generations. And as we just said, it's so important for future generations, and you will hear what the young people actually think about this convention when they come to speak to this committee on the first day after the opening. Now, next slide, please. You have, of course, the criteria. It's actually important to respond to one question, which is very simple. Why is this site important? And then you will find the answer when responding to those criteria. And next slide, please. And the second pillar is, of course, the integrity and authenticity. This is a very important question. Does the site to tell the whole story? Is the site large enough? I've seen many nominations coming in, especially for natural site. They were very tiny, and then Iucn says, this doesn't make it for the World Heritage list because the area covered by this site is too small. It will not survive. So the question is the site large enough? Does it contain all the necessary elements to tell the full story and to tell us why this site is really important? Next slide, please. This is on authenticity. This is for cultural sites. The question is it truthful? That means, are the attributes that explain this value, this importance, are those attributes actually truthful? Are they credible? Once again, this is an important part of the notion of outstanding universal value. And then the third part, it's the protection and management of this property. There may be a series of questions related to the management systems. You remember we introduced also the acceptance of traditional management systems. So it's not only a formal management plan which is required, it's actually a system of management and protection on the ground which works. Because I've seen many sites, there was a consultant flown in, prepared a management plan, and when you actually go on the site, oh yeah, it must be somewhere here on the shelf, but actually the site manager and the team doesn't know that this plan exists, or say this was an old plan, it's here on the shelf. It needs to be implemented. And this is very much an issue of looking into the future of these sites. Then, of course, the statement of outstanding universal value needs to be very, very clear. It needs to allow for a clear understanding of why the site is of outstanding universal value. It needs to give the direction of the management. It can guide the assessment of the state of conservation of the property, and it's a very important reference point for the monitoring, because you know exactly what you are monitoring and what you will transmit to future generations. This is why I'm personally always very sad if the committee is not able to even adopt a statement of outstanding universal value when they inscribe a site. This is a pre-requirement for inscription. We need to know what we have inscribed and what we are actually protecting. If this is not there, I personally don't know how the committee can inscribe a site, and I'm very clear on that. I think also you need to look into that potential for outstanding universal value when you identify sites for the tentative list. So that means you are also working already towards this potential OUV when you identify those sites. Next slide, and with this I will close the presentation of outstanding universal value before we come to state of conservation. But let me also, for the benefit of some of our newcomers at the World Heritage Center and some others in the room, explain one other thing. Outstanding universal value has no S in the end. Do you know why? You know why? No? It's not values, it's only value. Why? And I'm looking at my colleagues of Iucn. Because when the committee had the discussion of inscription on the danger list, there was a huge debate, and we had legal advice from the Bonn Law Center. The outstanding universal value is 1. So if there's a threat to the site, it's a threat to the outstanding universal value. It's not values. You cannot say there is a threat to values. It's not possible. It's only 1. So please, no S in all the texts I get from my colleagues from the World Heritage Center. I can share this legal advice with you, but this is very important, especially when we come to danger listing. And with this, I turn over to my colleagues on the state of conservation. Thank you. Yes, I was looking, Richard, where are you?
I'm hiding. Merci, Mechtil. Donc, en proposant pour inscription sur la liste du patrimoine mondial un site de valeur universelle exceptionnelle, les États parties prennent un engagement ferme envers la conservation de ce site pour l'ensemble de l'humanité et pour les générations futures. Diapo suivante. Les articles 4 et 6 de la Convention placent en effet la conservation au cœur même de cette Convention et soulignent que le devoir de conserver ces biens est celui de la communauté internationale dans son ensemble. Il était dès lors nécessaire d'avoir un mécanisme de suivi performant permettant d'assurer que les valeurs pour lesquelles un bien a été inscrit sont préservées et donc que la valeur universelle exceptionnelle est préservée, au singulier. Diapo suivante. Certaines dispositions donc, de la Convention, et plus particulièrement l'article 11.4, précisent l'obligation statutaire pour le Comité du patrimoine mondial de surveiller l'état de conservation des biens inscrits sur la liste en péril, afin de garantir que leur valeur universelle exceptionnelle est préservée. Sur cette base, les dispositions pour un suivi réactif de l'état de conservation de tous les biens inscrits, qu'ils soient en péril ou non, ont évolué au cours du temps pour aboutir à un processus parfaitement défini, tel que présenté au chapitre 4 des orientations actuellement en vigueur. Diapo suivante. Le suivi réactif est ainsi défini au paragraphe 169 des orientations comme étant la soumission au comité par le secrétariat et les organisations consultatives de rapports sur l'état de conservation des biens qui sont menacés. Ce paragraphe précise également les dates auxquelles les États parties sont tenus de soumettre leur rapport au secrétariat. Et comme l'a dit la directrice du Centre du patrimoine mondial ce matin, cette année, nous avons reçu 99% de tous les rapports demandés par le comité, ce qui est assez exceptionnel. Le paragraphe 172 propose quant à lui un cadre visant à faciliter le dialogue et l'envoi d'informations par les États parties concernés, en cas notamment de projets de développement ou de restauration susceptibles d'avoir un impact sur la valeur universelle exceptionnelle du bien. Conformément au paragraphe 174, les informations reçues par le secrétariat ou les organisations consultatives de la part de sources tierces sont communiquées à l'État partie concerné pour obtenir des précisions quant à la menace qui y est relatée. Ces dispositions ont pour but de permettre un meilleur échange d'informations entre toutes les parties prenantes. Diapo suivante. Le secrétariat et les organisations consultatives examinent ainsi toutes les informations dont ils disposent à l'égard de l'état de conservation des différents biens et rédigent de manière collégiale des rapports SOC pour examen par le comité au titre des points 7A et 7B de l'ordre du jour. Et cette année, vous aurez 166 rapports SOC pour examen. Diapo suivante. Alors, afin de faciliter votre travail, un format standard est utilisé pour présenter toutes ces informations. Chaque rapport SOC présente ainsi des informations de base sur le bien, telles que son année d'inscription, les critères, s'il y a eu des missions de suivi réactif ou non sur ce bien, si le bien a bénéficié d'assistance internationale, etc., etc. Les rapports présentent également les menaces passées et les problèmes actuels de conservation, une analyse objective de la situation sur le terrain et les conclusions du secrétariat et des organisations consultatives, et enfin un projet de décision pour adoption par le comité. Madame la directrice, à présent, j'aimerais donner la parole à nos collègues des organisations consultatives pour présenter les aspects plus techniques du suivi réactif, leur rôle dans ce processus, ainsi que la liste du patrimoine mondial en péril.
Merci beaucoup, Richard. Donc, I give the floor to Iucn first.
Many thanks, and good afternoon or good morning for 1 minute to everybody. Do we still have the slides? No. Okay, so the slides are back. At least the English part. I think the French is not there yet. Okay, so we're waiting for the French slides, and we've just realized that Regina from e-commerce will actually start with the introductory part to this.
Thank you, Mechtilde. If you would allow, I will continue as Richard just indicated. Par l'inscription sur la liste du patrimoine mondial, les États parties s'engagent à protéger, conserver, gérer et assurer le suivi des biens afin de pérenniser leur valeur universelle exceptionnelle. Pour leur part, les organisations consultatives s'engagent à mettre à la disposition du Comité du patrimoine mondial et des États parties un conseil d'ordre scientifique et technique sur des problèmes de conservation pour la prise de décision. Comme vous l'aviez indiqué précédemment, Madame la Directrice, les rapports de suivi de l'état de conservation préparés pour le Comité portent sur un nombre limité de biens par rapport à celui des biens inscrits qui figurent sur la liste du patrimoine mondial. Ces rapports sur l'état de conservation se basent sur les informations fournies par les États parties, mais aussi sur d'autres sources qui auront été préalablement vérifiées. L'analyse objective de la nature et des sources des problèmes de conservation débouche sur des propositions de solutions techniques appropriées. Ces rapports de suivi de l'état de conservation des biens sont élaborés en collaboration avec le Centre du patrimoine mondial et ce travail conjoint doit garantir que le contenu des rapports répond bien aux exigences techniques et administratives attendues par le comité. Dans chacune des organisations consultatives, une équipe de spécialistes prépare des projets de rapports. Ils connaissent les biens et ont une expérience des problèmes auxquels ces derniers sont confrontés. Dans certains cas, les organisations consultatives peuvent faire appel à d'autres spécialistes, membres de leur réseau, qui pourront apporter une connaissance sur des aspects très spécifiques de la conservation pour compléter ce travail. Les facteurs qui influent sur la valeur universelle exceptionnelle transmise par des attributs physiques, des processus et parfois des associations sont multiples. Ils couvrent un large éventail qui va de la dégradation matérielle aux ouvrages à grande échelle, à l'utilisation des ressources biologiques, en passant entre autres par la gestion. Les rapports ainsi préparés pour la session du comité proposent en plus des rapports relatifs à une synthèse des problèmes de conservation émergents et récurrents. Ces rapports sont présentés au Comité du patrimoine mondial conjointement avec le Centre du patrimoine mondial à l'occasion de sa réunion annuelle. Il s'agit de présentations très courtes qui ouvrent les discussions du comité. Les organisations consultatives peuvent alors être appelées à répondre aux questions techniques des membres du comité. Le processus de suivi réactif doit être le plus proactif possible. Il doit également disposer des outils les plus pointus, tout comme de la méthodologie la plus claire pour évaluer l'impact des menaces sur la valeur universelle exceptionnelle et ses attributs. Il doit être mis en œuvre dès que possible afin de minimiser les impacts sur le bien. Pour ce faire, des outils ont été mis à la disposition des États parties sous la forme de publications, et la diapositive suivante vous donnera quelques informations à ce sujet. Il faut également noter ces dernières années les progrès accomplis dans ce domaine avec les déclarations rétrospectives de valeur universelle exceptionnelle et la coproduction avec le Centre du patrimoine mondial des manuels de référence sur la gestion des risques de catastrophe, ou bien les orientations de l'Iucn et de l'ICOMOS pour l'établissement des études d'impact. La stratégie pour le renforcement des capacités, avec plus particulièrement ces cours pour praticiens, rejoint ces dispositifs qui sont mis à la disposition des États parties. Par ailleurs, il faut souligner que le processus de suivi réactif prédispose à un dialogue positif et constructif avec les États parties autour de problèmes réels. Cet engagement auprès des États parties prend place notamment au cours des missions de suivi réactif et des missions de conseil demandées par le Comité du patrimoine mondial. Ces missions visent à soutenir les États parties dans leur travail pour atteindre les objectifs définis par le Comité du patrimoine mondial. Cet engagement auprès des États parties prend également la forme d'accompagnement dans la préparation des outils de gestion et de protection des biens. Les échanges entre les États parties, le Centre du patrimoine mondial et les organisations consultatives prennent également la forme de réunions de travail qui sont organisées notamment autour des sessions du Comité du patrimoine mondial, mais en dehors et souvent à distance. Le processus de suivi réactif devrait reporter l'attention de toutes les parties prenantes sur la meilleure manière d'utiliser l'expérience partagée et la coopération internationale pour résoudre des problèmes de conservation. Et c'est ainsi que l'ICOMOS souhaiterait terminer sa présentation au nom des 3 organisations consultatives. Merci.
Thank you very much to Regina from ICOMOS, and now we turn over to Iucn.
Thank you very much. So in fact, this next slide just relates to what ICOMOS was presenting on the monitoring work that the advisory bodies are doing and some of the resources and capacity building materials and the studies that we do that support that work that you can also refer to. But with that, if we go to the next slide, we would like also to focus more specifically on the list of World Heritage in danger, because this is in fact a very important mechanism and the one that has been designed and created as a call for action and in fact a constructive mechanism that we all can use, the states parties and everybody and all stakeholders, to preserve the outstanding universal value of the sites. So if we go to the next slide, in case the committee may decide to inscribe a particular site on the list of World Heritage in danger, and the specific conditions for that are very in detail explained in the operational guidelines, so everybody can refer to that for specific details on the procedure and specifically on the conditions for inscription on the list of World Heritage in danger. But this part is mainly also to highlight the process to you and explain how it works. So in case of inscription on the list in danger, there are a number of mechanisms that accompany that process. So one of them is a set of corrective measures that are also adopted by the committee and a time frame for their implementation that the state party should use as sort of a roadmap for the activities that need to be undertaken in order to preserve the outstanding universal value of a site. So the corrective measures are really a set of actions that need to be undertaken urgently in order to preserve the site and its OUV and its integrity. If we go to the next slide, there is also what is called desired state of conservation for removal of a property from the list of World Heritage in danger, or DSOCAR, as you can see the acronym. This is a slightly newer mechanism that was introduced some years ago, and this is again an instrument that is designed to help guide the state party in its actions to preserve the site. So it consists of very specific elements, and it is developed by the state party together with the World Heritage Center and the advisory bodies, who can always provide technical assistance for the development of the DSOCAR. Sometimes it is done in form of a mission, so a reactive monitoring mission to the site can already help with the development of the desired state of conservation. And the desired state of conservation is then adopted by the committee, so it is attached or included in the state of conservation report and the draft decision accompanying it. And is adopted by the committee. And if we go to the next slide, this is what it consists of. So it has very specific elements, namely indicators, rationale for the indicators, and method of verification, and the time frame. So just very briefly, without going into much details, the idea is that certain indicators can help then monitor the OUV and the threats to that OUV, and essentially can help decide if the threats to the OUV of a site have been eliminated, and the site can then be removed from the list of World Heritage in danger. So again, this is designed as a roadmap and as a way of following the site while it's on the list of World Heritage in danger, and then also removing it from that list if it has met the conditions for that. So each indicator also has a rationale for why it has been proposed, describing how it relates to the OUV specifically. So for example, for natural sites, it can be a forest cover in a particular area that has to remain at a certain level. Next to it, there is a method of verification, so it's really how we can then see that this indicator has been fulfilled, and the time frame for the implementation. So again, proposed time frame, for example, several years, during which this has to be completed, and then it can then be verified by the advisory bodies and then by the committee when it comes to the decision to remove a site from the list in danger. So it's really a way for the state party to have this mechanism, to have a list of specific actions that need to be undertaken, and then for the advisory bodies and for the committee to verify if those conditions have been met and the site can be removed from the list in danger. And then if we go to the next slide, just an example from you, many of you might have hopefully heard of this success story, which was the National Park Los Catillos in Colombia, where there was a proactive decision and a request from the state party itself to put the site on the list in danger in 2009 due to various threats that it was facing, including illegal logging, illegal use of resources, major infrastructure projects, and several other threats. And the committee indeed decided to inscribe the list on the site on the list in danger, and also adopted a desired state of conservation, including 3 indicators on threats and 2 indicators on potential threats. And on the next slide, you can see that those actions that were proposed and the desired state of conservation have been successfully achieved by the state party within quite a short time frame, actually. And in fact, the fact that the site was inscribed on the danger list has helped the state party itself to draw attention to the situation, to raise political awareness of the situation, and also help channel resources and funds to the conservation of the property. So it's really just to highlight again and to emphasize that this mechanism is there for you, for the states parties to use as a constructive way of preserving their sites and their outstanding universal value. So it's really a way to also draw attention from the international community and find help from everybody to help preserve the sites. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think maybe we can go now. Richard, you wanted still to do something on where to find your documents and the role of the committee. Please.
Merci, Mathilde. Donc, en tant que membre du comité du patrimoine mondial, de quels documents aurez-vous besoin et où pourrez-vous vous les procurer? Diapo suivante. Donc, dans le cadre du suivi réactif, il vous sera nécessaire d'examiner conjointement un certain nombre de documents, notamment les rapports soumis par les États parties ou leur résumé, dans l'éventualité où le rapport complet n'est pas en ligne publiquement, les rapports de mission, les décisions, bien sûr, précédemment adoptées par le comité, et ceci afin de garantir un meilleur suivi dans le temps et une meilleure cohérence des décisions au fil du temps, et bien sûr les rapports SOC rédigés par le secrétariat et les organisations consultatives. Diapo suivante. Donc, tous ces documents se trouvent sur le site internet du Centre du patrimoine mondial, à l'adresse qui est indiquée en haut des écrans. Comme il vous a été indiqué ce matin, nous avons d'ores et déjà mis en ligne 96 rapports d'état de conservation et 154 rapports fournis par les États parties. Diapo suivante. Donc, le Centre met également à votre disposition un système d'information en ligne public sur l'état de conservation des biens du patrimoine mondial. Vous y trouverez plus de 3600 rapports SOC présentés au comité. Mais cette plateforme propose également une explication détaillée du processus de suivi réactif, des statistiques, les différents formats pour les rapports, ainsi qu'un certain nombre de guides, de notes d'orientation, des manuels pour la gestion et la conservation. Diapo suivante. Alors, afin d'introduire ce point sur votre rôle en matière de suivi de l'état de conservation, je souhaite toujours utiliser en fait une citation d'un paragraphe des orientations de 1977, aujourd'hui disparu, mais qui disait avec éloquence que les responsabilités du comité du patrimoine mondial sont immenses. Mais il n'est pas de défi plus important à relever, il n'est pas de tâche qui ne mérite autant d'être entreprise que l'action menée au nom des peuples du monde afin d'aider les États à protéger pour les générations futures les biens, tant culturels que naturels, ayant une valeur universelle exceptionnelle. Alors, pour relever ce défi, diapo suivante, en tant que membre du comité, il vous a demandé d'adopter une décision sur chaque rapport SOC, conformément au paragraphe 176 des orientations. Vous pourrez ainsi décider qu'aucune action ultérieure ne devrait être entreprise si le bien ne s'est pas détérioré ou n'est plus menacé, ou bien que l'État partie prenne les mesures spécifiques nécessaires afin d'atténuer les menaces et qu'il les mette en œuvre dans un laps de temps raisonnable. Mais vous pourrez également demander à l'État partie de tenir le secrétariat informé de la mise en œuvre de ces mesures par le biais d'un nouveau rapport, sous 1 an, sous 2 ans, sous 3 ans, en fonction des cas, mais selon un calendrier défini. Enfin, vous pourrez également décider qu'une mission d'experts est nécessaire sur place afin d'examiner l'état de conservation du bien de manière plus approfondie. Diapo suivante. Enfin, comme l'Iucn vous l'a expliqué un petit peu plus tôt, quand les conditions l'exigent, vous pourrez décider d'inscrire un bien sur la liste du patrimoine mondial en péril ou de l'y maintenir si son état de conservation ne s'est pas suffisamment amélioré. À l'inverse, si l'état de conservation du bien s'est amélioré de manière telle que sa valeur universelle exceptionnelle n'est plus menacée, vous pourrez alors décider de retirer ce bien de la liste en péril. En dernier recours, et en cas de détérioration évidente du bien au point où il a irréversiblement perdu les caractéristiques ayant justifié son inscription, vous pourrez alors décider de retirer ce bien de la liste du patrimoine mondial. En conclusion, diapo suivante. Pour assurer votre rôle de la manière la plus efficace possible, vous pouvez de nouveau être assuré que toutes les analyses faites pour votre compte de la part du secrétariat et des organisations consultatives sont effectuées de manière approfondie et avec toute la compétence et l'expertise requises, conformément au paragraphe 23 des orientations. Nous restons bien entendu à votre disposition pour toute information complémentaire. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Richard. I think you need to cover also the role of the committee, or did you cover all of this in one go? So maybe you have specific questions on this part, on state of conservation. Any specific question you have on that? No? You know all how it goes, putting a site on the danger list, removing it from the danger list. Rashad is nodding. No specific questions on this part? No. So if there are no specific questions, then we go to the nominations part, and we would like to look at the requirements for inscriptions and the evaluation process. Please, the advisory bodies, who would like to start? Gwenelle. You haven't spoken today. Please.
Voilà, bonjour. Donc effectivement, je vais vous présenter les conditions d'inscription d'un bien sur la liste du patrimoine mondial, ce qui répétera d'une façon différente, j'espère, ce que Mechtilde vous a présenté en ce qui concerne le concept de valeur universelle exceptionnelle. Donc, si on peut passer à la diapo suivante, s'il vous plaît. Donc, les organisations consultatives qui réalisent une étude scientifique des propositions d'inscription évaluent dans quelle mesure les biens proposés pour inscription remplissent les conditions de valeur universelle exceptionnelle, telles que définies par les orientations. Donc, ce sont les trois piliers ou les trois murs porteurs, disons, qui soutiennent la maison de la valeur universelle exceptionnelle. Et ces conditions sont donc les critères d'inscription, l'intégrité et l'authenticité, la protection et la gestion. Donc, la Convention du patrimoine mondial est une convention de site. Ce sont bien des biens qu'on inscrit sur la liste. Et ces biens s'expriment à travers une valeur universelle exceptionnelle, et ce sont les attributs qui sont porteurs de cette valeur universelle exceptionnelle. Les attributs, ce sont des éléments physiques, des aspects tangibles ou intangibles, ou des processus, et qui manifestent la valeur universelle exceptionnelle d'un bien. Diapo suivante. Donc, l'inscription d'un bien est recommandée par les organisations consultatives lorsque les conditions suivantes sont remplies. Donc, à propos de l'analyse comparative, cette analyse est considérée comme étant satisfaisante dans la mesure où elle a démontré la façon dont le bien se distingue par rapport à d'autres exemples similaires dans la même ère géoculturelle. Et cette analyse a également permis d'appréhender l'importance d'un bien dans son contexte national et international. Les organisations consultatives s'appuient en complément des informations qui sont contenues dans le dossier de proposition d'inscription sur des recherches scientifiques et des études thématiques disponibles pour évaluer l'adéquation de l'analyse comparative. En ce qui concerne les critères, il faut qu'un ou plusieurs, ou même l'ensemble des critères culturels et ou naturels aient été justifiés. Pour ce qui concerne les conditions d'intégrité ont été démontrées si tous les éléments qui sont nécessaires à l'expression de la valeur universelle exceptionnelle sont bien inclus dans les délimitations du bien, si le bien est d'une taille suffisante, Mechtilde l'avait mentionné, pour représenter les éléments et processus qui expriment cette valeur, et si finalement le bien n'a pas souffert d'impact négatif dû au développement ou à l'abandon. Donc, si l'on prend un exemple, un paysage agro-industriel devra inclure les éléments qui contribuent à dépeindre les principaux facteurs géographiques, technologiques et socio-historiques qui ont rendu possible son établissement et son développement. Et pour les biens culturels uniquement, on vérifie que les conditions d'authenticité sont remplies. Et ces conditions d'authenticité sont remplies si les valeurs qui sont mises en avant sont exprimées de manière véridique et crédible, à travers une variété d'attributs. Donc l'ICOMOS va vérifier dans quelle mesure les sources d'informations qui témoignent de la valeur du bien, la façon dont ces sources, si elles sont véridiques. Pour un site archéologique, par exemple, l'ICOMOS va considérer comment les vestiges matériels du bien, associés aux informations qui auront été obtenues grâce aux recherches archéologiques et ainsi qu'aux dépôts enfouis, donc la façon dont ces vestiges apportent un témoignage crédible à l'appui de l'importance de la culture qui aura bâti ce bien. Diapositive suivante. En ce qui concerne les délimitations, ces délimitations sont considérées satisfaisantes si elles incluent tous les éléments qui contribuent à la valeur du bien, si elles comprennent des zones qui, à la lumière de recherches futures, permettraient d'accroître la compréhension du bien, et si elles ont été clairement délimitées. Elles peuvent coïncider avec des zones protégées, et les zones tampons doivent assurer un surcroît de protection au bien. Par ailleurs, la protection est considérée adéquate si le bien est protégé de façon réglementaire, donc soit au niveau national, régional, municipal et ou traditionnel, et de préférence au plus haut niveau possible. Tout le bien et ses attributs doivent faire l'objet d'une protection. Les mesures de conservation qui sont mises en place sont considérées satisfaisantes dans la mesure où elles permettent de maintenir les valeurs du bien ainsi que les conditions d'intégrité et d'authenticité. Et finalement, la gestion est considérée appropriée si elle s'appuie sur une compréhension claire de la valeur universelle exceptionnelle et de ses attributs, puisque ce sont les attributs que l'on conserve et que l'on maintient pour le futur du bien, si elle définit la façon dont celle-ci sera préservée dans le futur, si elle permet de gérer les changements de manière efficace, et dans la mesure aussi où elle s'appuie sur des moyens participatifs. Diapo suivante. Donc, comme si vous vous souvenez le diagramme avec les 3 murs porteurs et le mur porteur qui tombait, donc si vous avez cette image en tête, un bien peut échouer sur l'un ou l'autre de ces aspects, c'est-à-dire qu'il peut avoir une importance universelle, mais une protection et une gestion qui ne sont pas satisfaisantes. À l'inverse, il peut être bien protégé et géré, mais ne pas avoir démontré une importance universelle exceptionnelle. Donc la non-réalisation de certaines des conditions précisées précédemment doit conduire à proposer d'autres recommandations que l'inscription. Ce sont bien l'ensemble de ces conditions, telles qu'elles sont définies par les orientations, qui doivent être réunies afin de permettre l'inscription d'un bien sur la liste. Les organisations consultatives, dans leurs évaluations, peuvent être amenées à faire des recommandations additionnelles, mais l'inscription n'est pas conditionnelle à la réalisation de ces recommandations supplémentaires. Ces recommandations sont perçues comme des orientations utiles pour la prise en compte de questions pour le futur du bien. Dernière diapo. Finalement, les organisations consultatives agissent dans l'intérêt de la conservation des biens. Cela signifie que parfois, il est recommandé que plus de temps soit accordé pour permettre l'inscription d'un bien sur la liste. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. Allow me to continue for Iucn. So next slide, please. First of all, let me say thank you for the opportunity to be here at this really important information and orientation session. It's, I think, a really critical opportunity to exchange information, but the most important thing I think that I can say to you is to remember my face, remember Iucn, and please seek us out for any information or advice. We are there to support the committee, make the best possible decisions, please come and find us in Baku on any of this information. Next slide, please. I will just go through a few points in relation to IUCN's work on nominations and evaluations. It's very much supplementary to what Gwenaëlle has said. These are 4 principles which guide our work on evaluations. The first one relates to the adoption of very high standards of independent assessment. And I think it's important to stress for you that IUCN, as I know ICOMOS does, takes very seriously the provisions of paragraph 148 of the operational guidelines, which calls upon us to be rigorous, calls upon us to be objective, to operate with equity to the highest professional standards. An important dimension for IUCN and ICOMOS, I know, is consistency with previous committee decisions, but also internal consistency within IUCN on our evaluation processes and past positions which may have been adopted. We work very strongly in partnership with the World Heritage Centre, with ICOMOS, with ICROM, and also with the United Nations Environment World Conservation Monitoring Centre based in Cambridge, who undertake analyses for us. We very much promote World Heritage as flagships for conservation, and we work through a wide network of support. I would also like to stress that we work very strongly to respect the different roles which we play through this process, and particularly at the committee. So we as advisory bodies are really there to provide fiercely independent technical advice to the committee to base their decisions on. That advice is based on best science, it's based on comparative analysis, and it's based on peer review. The World Heritage Centre, of course, as secretariat to the convention and the committee, I think really plays a facilitation role. So we as advisors, the centre as facilitators, and of course the committee as decision takers, weighing the technical evidence against the operational guidelines as an intergovernmental body to make these decisions. Next slide, please. It's important, I think, to understand the context of IUCN's work on World Heritage. We really consider ourselves as one of the early partners to the convention, one of the early initiators of this idea. We very much see ourselves as a partner to the convention, and we're very concerned about ensuring a healthy future for the convention. IUCN has very strong support across its entire membership for our work on World Heritage. We invest heavily in World Heritage work to an equal, if not greater extent, to the work we do as a statutory function as advisory body. And this slide is of the Promise of Sydney, which was prepared in 2014 and really dictates for us the directions that IUCN would like to take with World Heritage, seeing these places as real exemplars of good conservation practice, the litmus test of conservation, but also places where we can affect change. So we're very interested to contribute to the discussions on the Sustainable Development Agenda and the post-2020 Biodiversity Framework Agenda. Next slide, please. So this complex-looking diagram is our evaluation process, and all of this information is spelled out very clearly in Annex 6 of the operational guidelines. It's also elaborated on IUCN's website. It is best to work through this document from the bottom to the top, if I may put it that way. It is a process which is multidimensional, uses inputs from a lot of different sources. We take great heed from the nomination dossier that nominating states parties invest tremendous time, energy and money in preparing. We undertake a field evaluation mission. We undertake global comparative analyses with the World Conservation Monitoring Centre on sites which are nominated under criterion 9 and 10, the biodiversity criteria, to look at the spatial comparisons and to look at where properties may have been identified through biodiversity conservation mechanisms that are considered priority areas. We invest a lot in seeking out external reviewers on these properties who have expertise specific to either the regions or the thematic areas. and we very much value the dialogue process which we're able to engage in with the nominating states parties, and very committed to continuing to engage in the reform processes and discussions which are underway within the convention, and particularly through the ad hoc working group, reinforcing the need for more upstream advice and reinforcing the need for an integrated package of reforms that is well thought through, operationalised and costed. Next slide, please. As with ICOMOS, we use a wide network of experts across IUCN. In particular, we have a World Commission on Protected Areas specialist group on World Heritage, which now numbers 741 members. It's one of the largest networks within the World Commission on Protected Areas. We have established a searchable database which allows us now to increasingly interrogate those experts in terms of their regional expertise, their thematic expertise. We work very closely with the Species Survival Commission also as part of our networks, engaging on particularly field mission work. And I think we're already on the next slide, which relates to our World Heritage Panel, which operates as the ultimate decision-making body. I think maybe the slides are the other way around. The panel for IUCN normally consists of 10 to 12 members, but we will review the size of our panel given the new ceilings imposed by paragraph 61, which we welcome the reduced emphasis on nominations and the opportunity to redirect our focus into the state of conservation issues. A lot of details on our panel are on our website, the composition of the panel, the terms of reference for the panel. The panel operates under a code of conduct and a system of rotation, and as I mentioned before, operates with total independence. There is no influence brought to bear within the IUCN system, even from our Director General, on the way in which the World Heritage Panel operates. We have been supporting the convention for all of its duration as advisory body. We, as I said, endeavour to make sure that's a consistent approach, but we are always open to reforms, changes and evolution of our working methods. And I think I will close there and again reiterate my invitation to please talk to us as committee members about any of our recommendations to help you understand the basis of those, and as I said, to help you in Baku make the best possible decisions. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both ICOMOS and IUCN. I now turn over to Alessandro, who will look at the related documentation and the role of the committee, and then we open up a discussion. So if you have any question, keep it in mind.
Thank you very much, Matilda. We are very close to the end of this session, so I will be very brief also to leave some time for potential questions. And what we are doing here is just to show where to get information on nomination, as it was done before by my colleague Richard on state of conservation. So next slide, please. You have the overall internet web address is the same, and when you click on next slide, please, on the folder concerning nomination, you may find, next slide, the list of 38 nominations which are currently those to be examined by the committee at this session. And for each of these nominations, next slide, you have the full documentation, meaning you have the nomination text, you have annexes, you have everything that goes with the nomination in order to know about each case. These nominations were made available to committee members right from actually the March of last year, and progressively have been fed with additional information and reworked in order to really include all the documentation. But since the first dispatch on 20th of May, they were made available to all state parties. I think, that we can go to the next slide. By clicking there, as you will see, you can get the full nomination text where the state parties present their arguments for nominations. And next slide, you also have to bear in mind that to have the full picture, you have to look at documents under item 8b. And 8b had. Document 8b presents the draft decisions for all the nominations except the 4 referred ones that will be presented in document 8b had, which will be then dispatched on the 7th of June. Along with that, of course, the evaluations of the advisory bodies that are presented as information documents. One thing that I like to say something about again, because it may be really important, is that if you look into document 8b, actually on page 4, you will have the order of presentation of nominations. So as it was said this morning, from natural sites, then mixed site and cultural sites. So we will start with the 6 natural nomination and then to the 2 mixed one, and then we will go on with the cultural sites. It will be extremely important, I like to stress this, that the committee stick to the time which is allowed, because if we multiply the time that is spent on the examination of nomination normally at each session by the number of nominations that are actually still on the agenda, will actually exceed the 3 days that are given to the examination of nominations. So we have to be very, very good in time management, yes. Next slide. Very briefly, we will also look at the role of the World Heritage Committee in the specific case of nomination. Next slide. And in this context, we like to remind paragraph 23 of the operational guidelines, where it says that the committee decisions are based on objective and scientific consideration, and any appraisal made on its behalf must be thoroughly and responsibly carried out. And the committee recognizes that such decisions depend on carefully prepared documentation. So we have seen where you can get that documentation. Thorough and consistent procedures. So also this is, I think, very important for committee members to know all the different procedures, and maybe I would like to underline the fact of having a good knowledge about the differences, for instance, between the procedure of referral and deferral, and that what each of this procedure may imply. And then, of course, the evaluation by qualified expert, and if necessary, the use of expert referees. Next slide, please. And also would like to underline paragraph 24. And now, as it was said by the director of the center, you know why outstanding universal value has no S. It's only one. But basically, this is really, in terms of nomination, the main function of the committee is to identify, on the basis of tentative list and nominations submitted by state parties, the cultural and natural properties of outstanding universal value. Next slide. And of course, for the committee, there are 4 types of decision which are available in terms of nominations: is to inscribe, to refer back to the state party when there is just some minor, let's say, action to be taken about the site. Normally we refer, the committee refer a site, a nomination, when, for instance, is waiting for the approval of a law or on the protection of the site. And deferral requires also that the nomination is submitted again for the full cycle, so the nomination is prepared following basically the guidance that is given in the evaluation by the advisory bodies. And I like to underline how this process is very important and very positive when it's used correctly, because it's a kind of basically upstream process, more in-depth upstream process, because the guidance that is given in the evaluation by the advisory bodies is actually very, very useful to prepare a new nomination which really fits more to the needs of the site. And we have seen many successful cases when the deferral is followed by the committee. And then there's the last decision is not to inscribe. When this decision is taken about a nomination, this cannot be represented anymore. And with this, I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we covered now all the issues which we would wanted to do at the orientation session. Do you have any specific questions on the nominations, on state of conservation, on the procedures? No? You don't have a question? If you don't have any specific questions, I would like to tell you that we have an orientation session at the World Heritage Committee, and there we will do a little bit more on the procedures, because there are some committee members, they have changed, the ambassadors have changed, etc. So you need to be very much familiarized with the procedures in terms of voting on proposals, etc. We will have also our legal advisor with us, and that will take place in Baku at 3 o'clock on the Sunday. From 2 to 3 we have the bureau session, and then from 3 to 4 we have the orientation session. Now, if you have any specific questions you would like us to cover in the session in Baku, let us know. I give you also an email that's of Valerie. Put your hand up, Valerie. It's a very easy email. It's vm@icrom.org. vm@icrom.org. So we are collecting questions with Valerie, which we can then answer at the session in Baku. Questions which you always wanted to know. So how is the voting going for a state of conservation inscription on the danger list or not, etc. How can we change the decisions? Is there voting on diverse proposals, or what are other processes, etc., which the chairperson may be able to use? So any specific questions you have on processes and procedures, we will cover that at the session on the Sunday afternoon in Baku. Now, you can also leave a little note with the Secretariat. We transmit it to ICROM, and we collect those questions so that we can focus on any specific questions you may have. Now, if there's nothing else, also from my colleagues, I would like to tell you that the last issue of the World Heritage Review is out. It's on walled cities, which is quite interesting. And it's online in English, French, and Spanish. We are running in a difficult situation with the World Heritage Review, so we were looking into reducing the costs, so maybe Spanish will not exist anymore next year unless we find a solution. We are in touch with several delegations, but I wanted to tell you that this issue is online, and the next issue of the World Heritage Review comes out for the World Heritage Committee session in Azerbaijan, which will be your guiding review to visit visit all the World Heritage Sites in Azerbaijan. Okay, with this I would like to thank everybody here on the podium, everybody in the room, and I wish you a nice lunch and see you in Baku on the 30th of June. Bye-bye.